Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of Talking About the Big Stuff with Michael Cole. Today, I have on the show my best friend from high school. I should say one of my best friends, because a couple of people might be irritated if they hear that. Pat Brennan. Say hi, Pat.
Hi, everyone.
So today, we're going to talk about masculinity. And before we dive in, I do want to just kind of clear something up for anybody who gets frustrated with the term toxic masculinity, because I don't see how we can talk about masculinity without touching upon it. So I figure we may as well get it out of the way right away. So the idea of toxic masculinity, the way I see it, and I think the way that language works, is, with modifiers, if I refer to chocolate ice cream, you know that I'm not saying all ice cream is chocolate. You understand that it is a type of a type of ice cream. And so when we say toxic masculinity, it's the same linguistics situation. It is a type, it's a subset. So if you hear us talking about toxic masculinity, I've seen plenty of comments online of, oh, it must have been real toxic masculinity when we defeated Hitler. Well, no, that's just, I don't know if that's even masculinity. That's just, a thing.
Doing the right thing. Yeah.
But so there's this willful ignorance around that. So I just wanted to nip that in the bud right now. But the reason I brought you on for this topic, I think you and I are both pretty masculine without being toxic. At least for the most part. Obviously, everyone can be toxic.
Yeah. Right. Most of the time, I think we're both, pretty good guys in general. Yeah, I would say so, at least.
Yeah. I also think, I know your dad reasonably well for a friend's dad, and you know my dad reasonably well. And I think our dads are interesting to talk about too, because, my dad, I would definitely say this about, and I kind of would say this about your dad, they're really masculine guys without it ever being something that my dad never professed. My dad was never like, be a man, or obsessed with the things men do, or, all those things that we kind of, I don't even want to say that's toxic masculinity in and of itself necessarily, but there's a lot of people who are obsessed with the idea of masculinity and wanting to fit into the roles. And so I have a dad who fit into a lot of the masculine roles, but wasn't obsessed with it, wasn't really, he didn't care when somebody else didn't fit into those roles. So it kind of, I think that made me fairly comfortable with, at the front page of our yearbook is me in a dress. And that was a long time ago. That was before, it was as popular for people to dress in without it being a thing.
Harry Styles world.
Exactly.
And,
so. This was back when it was either drag or it was nothing. And I was, for me, it was being goofy.
Right.
It was not an expression of gender, but it was a statement to some extent, regardless of the intent.
Right. I think, I definitely feel that way about my dad. I think he is a, pretty masculine guy, but it was never, it was just something that was natural. It was not it wasn't right or wrong. It was just who he was. And I think he feels that way about everyone else too, for the most part. I think that really did set an example for me. And I could see that with your dad as well, that, there are things I disagree with my dad about, and I know there are things that you disagree with your dad about, but that one thing, it was a really clear example for me as I moved forward in my life. I know that I could just say oh, this is, I'm masculine because that's just who I am. I don't even really think about it. That's exactly the example he set for me.
Yeah. That's pretty much the way my dad was. I genuinely, I remember getting my fingernails polished when I was 13, or actually I was probably 12.
Mm-hmm.
And him kind of being upset about it. but that was literally the only time of anything. And I honestly think it was more about it being standing out, because he was, my dad, I think, was pretty even with my sister, and I think if she had done the same color, he'd have been kind of irritated. Like, so I don't think it was as much about the nail polish. I think it was more like you're too young for that kind of thing.
Right.
And so, and at the time, I think I thought it was more gendered than it is. But like, I mean, I got a lot of I had a lot of years after that where I got to see basically that, unlike most parents that I know, my father treated my sister and I very consistently. I mean, the big differences between my sister and I and the way we were treated, I think, was more based on like oldest and youngest. Like, she's the baby, she gets away with more, but it was like never gender line kind of things. It was like she was allowed to, like, she swore in front of my parents before I did. Like, I said fuck in front of my dad for the first time in the pandemic. And, like that. And I was FaceTiming him about putting up something on sheetrock in Logan's room. And as he was answering the FaceTime, I got sheetrock in my eye, and I went, fuck. And he goes, what was that, Michael? And he laughed. He doesn't care. Because my sister had been swearing in front of him for at least 10 years at that point. Right. So like, I really do think a lot of the differences was just more in birth order than gender, which is a bit bizarre in a good way.
Yeah, I think it was the same thing with me and my older sister. I think she got a little bit more, she had more rules put on her, but I don't think it was because she was a girl. I think it was because this was all new territory for them. They didn't know, I mean, they knew what they were doing, but they didn't really know what they were doing, and when they got around to me, I mean, I could get away with a ton of stuff that they would never have let my sister get away with. And I did the exact same stuff my sister did, and she got in trouble and I had no problem. So yeah, I could definitely see that. There might have been some gender bits in there somewhere, like that could have played into it. I mean, I don't think that was the driving force behind it.
Yeah. Both of your parents are both in their 60s, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So they were, all of our parents were, well, my mom wasn't, but my dad and both your parents were born in the 50s.
Right.
And like, there's only so much to expect from.
Exactly.
Like, there's going to be some stuff that like it didn't even occur until, arguably until we were adults. So like, I am grading on a scale, but I think even if you took the amount of gendering that I saw from my parents in today's, if my parents were 20 years younger today, or I guess 30 years, because 20 years ago I was about to become an adult, which is really weird. I'm going to be 38 in 2 weeks. But if you flash back, my parents 30 years back and then put them in today's society, I don't think you definitely wouldn't think of them as
like dinosaurs aggressive or anything. Yeah.
You would be like, oh, those people are a little more old school, but they wouldn't be the people you were like telling your friends about. Like, I saw these parents,
right?
At least not in that way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think my parents would probably be rolling their eyes a little bit at a few things, but I don't think they would be like complaining to school boards or anything like that. I think they would be pretty okay.
So I kind of I don't think we need to keep going about parents, because I want to focus more on what we individually think about gender, or specifically masculinity, but I'm fine with gender roles in general. What do you think, like, what are masculine traits about yourself, like that? What do you like think about your own masculinity? Like, what do you think falls into the norm or clearly outside of the norm?
That's an interesting question. That's something that I think about actually kind of a lot, because I I think when I was younger, when I was, when we were in high school through college, stuff like that, I feel like masculinity was, I think to your point, like it wasn't something that was like the traditional gender role type thing was ever important to me, but like feeling masculine was important to me. But as I get older, it's something that kind of I've noticed that it just has sort of faded into the background, where I don't think about being masculine anymore as much. I think it's sort of like what we were talking about with our dads. Like I just kind of am, it's not something that I need to address on a daily basis. I mean, I have a beard. I dress masculinely. Like I don't wear makeup or do like a skincare routine. I don't do any of those. I mean, those are all, kind of like traditional masculine things, but I'm not like, it's not a performance or anything like that. It's not something that I need to actually do at all. It's something that just kind of happens on a daily basis. Like me not doing a skincare routine is as much about me, or much more actually, about me being lazy than anything else. Yeah. So it's, I think that, what I think about masculinity is something that is, it's there and it's something that I am, mm-hmm. I have that, but it's not something that I really care about, I guess is what I would say. It's not something that I even really, and I think it's such an interesting contrast to look back at. I wonder how common this is that, when I was a teenager, that was like, it's almost like I had to fit in, was, gender and sexuality was, so central to, who I was as a person. And it's just not there anymore. So, it's a kind of a weight off, you don't have to think about it anymore. Yeah. It feels good to have that. I don't know if that's something that you feel, or, if that's something that's common.
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, I feel like I feel fairly masculine in a decent amount of ways, mm-hmm. but I don't think much about it. In myself, I before we had a kid, even before we were pregnant, I was, and I don't want to sound like a hipster, but I was against gender reveal before it was a trans issue, when it was just a weird issue, like for me, like the idea of gender reveal. And I remember having conversations, and I think this was before Sarah was pregnant, but it could have been during her pregnancy, where I was like, look, I mean, I was opposed to finding out ahead of time anyway. I had like a lot of worry that, like, if you find out ahead of time and you name the baby ahead of time and you get attached and something happens, like there's all that problem. Right. But I was also like I just wanted like the whole big surprise of it all too. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people kept telling me like what I considered really stupid reasons, like, oh, you should find out ahead of time because you need to paint the baby's room the right color and get the right clothes and get the right toys. And I'm like, babies are like, other than their genitals, babies are genderless for all intents and purposes. Right. For a year and a half. Like, right. And then by that time, you're getting new crap for them.
Right. A baby is not going to care about its, if it has, well, they don't even have dolls at that point, but like if it had a doll or a toy soldier, because the baby can't even really see the thing at that point. So,
right. But even when you look at a baby, like, right. If you took a baby, you could take any, baby boy or baby girl, put them in any outfit, and the outfit is dictating what you think of their gender.
Right, exactly.
Like if you put me in a dress, you go, that's a guy in a dress. Right. If you're progressive, you might think that is a really poorly or early transitioning person. But and I don't mean that as a jab. I mean that as a jab at myself more than the trans community. Like I really, because I got a beard and I am, I'm clearly a man. I'd be an ugly woman. I'm an ugly man. I'd be a really ugly woman. But like, with most babies, like you look at the baby and the reason you know what gender it is because of the clothes.
Right.
And so I just didn't see the point in it. And I remember being like, well, I don't want to set up, like I don't want to be creating that. I mean, the world will do it. And Logan is arguably the perfect example of somebody who the world has stepped in, or he is naturally just a boy.
Right.
Like, because he is obsessed with boy crap. Like in a way that I never was, in a way that I never saw my dad be. He just, he says, oh, that's a girl toy, that's a girl color, that, and I'm fine with it to an extent. I try to make it in a way so that I try to talk to him about it in a way so that he doesn't feel locked in if he changes his mind, but also so that he's not being a jerk to other kids. Right, so, like, oh, I said, pink's a girl color. He said that a bunch of times. So my response is always, it's a color for whoever likes it. Like, literally, that's the response. And
right.
And so gender has come up a lot more because of Logan and just because of the idea of becoming a parent. But I've found some stuff interesting in culture outside of parenthood. And I'm kind of curious. So I've kind of come to this assumption. I'm going to make a bold statement that I know isn't accurate. It's what do you call it? Anecdotal, or
okay.
The fathers that you and I have, we didn't have these we didn't have toxic masculine fathers. We didn't have these uber masculine, like obsessed with their masculinity fathers. So we had what I think is a pretty like level baseline.
Right.
And then Gen Z, we're older millennials, but
right.
Younger millennials into Gen Z, they have there's a lot more gender fluidity, and I have zero problem with that. I am sometimes I'm arguably jealous of it. Like, I don't know. I just don't feel that comfortable in my skin to be like that all the time. But I'm, that's my hang up, not my, like, I definitely am, I'm, like I said, jealous. But our generation, there's a good amount of people that we went to high school with, or if you look at these alpha male podcasts and YouTube channels, they tend to be 5 years older to 5 years younger than us. Yeah, that whole range. We're in the middle of a 10-year thing of weirdly uber masculine. And I don't even think of uber, like, I don't want to call it uber masculine because that almost gives it the, like, yeah, they're real men, but I don't think that.
Yeah.
It's this
Ben Shapiro is not uber masculine.
Well, I'm not talking about Ben Shapiro. I'm talking about these guys who go on and they talk about the alphas and you got to be an alpha. And,
right.
And I always think it's funny because every time somebody talks about being an alpha, I literally think, like, I've never seen somebody and thought, oh, that is an actual alpha male, and ever heard them use the term alpha male.
Right.
Like, I don't know that I would consider my dad an alpha male, but he's pretty masculine, and he's always been, he is, I guess, in a lot of ways, the definition of what we kind of think of what an alpha male should be. He's, he did his own thing. He tried to provide for his family. He takes care of his family, and, all those things that we want. And I literally don't know that my dad knows the term alpha male. And
right.
He would never, like, I actually think if he heard some of the way these guys talk, he would just think they were such assholes. And I think, like, that is indicative of this, like, it's all that, I mean, I know that we talk about performative, and I think it is performative, but I almost think of it that performative kind of gives it it almost like downplays it. It's almost like cosplay.
Yeah,
it is.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah. Like, and I think that some of that is just it. I mean, it is really creepy to me when I see someone get really into that. I just am like, I don't understand, like, why. I mean, I get how they get incels and people who are a bit down on their luck as far socially, but, like, when you see somebody who's actually doing relatively well, whether it's dating wise or just has a decent amount of friends, and they act like that, I'm like, what the fuck happened to you?
Right. It's, you almost feel like there has to be some sort of like trauma or something there that like
Yeah.
caused this, because there is no reason for it. When you get down to it, like we said, like at a certain age, we kind of just it's like, oh, that stuff doesn't really matter that much. And it starts to feel like, oh, you're holding on to something for some reason that you should probably be in therapy for, really,
Yeah.
because that is, you're not examining something, you're avoiding something.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think that it was easy when we saw people, when we see, you look at, I mean, it still goes on today, but you look at 20 years ago, whenever you'd have one of these preachers talking about um, homosexuality nonstop, and you're like, well,
Hmm.
they're a closeted gay person,
Right.
and like that became almost so cliched that it's become insulting. Like
Right.
it's to assume that, um, but it's there is some kind of truth to it, and it's really like this is a different thing, and I don't know what this is masking.
It's just their own insecurities or something like that, but it just doesn't seem like big enough to cover
Yeah,
that. Like,
yeah,
I think we're all insecure, and we all have those things that we tackle, but we don't go that direction. And
yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand what brings someone to that, really, either. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was trying to get at, was like with the homophobic preachers being closeted, gay men.
Right.
It was understandable to some extent, even though it's an offensive cliche now to think of that way, like it, because it was, at least you understood it, because there's that thou doth protest too much, you get it.
Right.
What are alpha males protesting? And I mean, and maybe I'm missing the obvious. Maybe they are trans and don't know how to deal with it, or maybe they are something else. But I just don't understand like what that level of like grunting, like buffoonery, is in reaction to. And and,
Right.
and we, not to say that these things didn't exist when we were younger, but like to some extent they were, I think they were parody. Think about Tim Allen, and I don't know that I think Tim Allen's a great comedian, but we understood that the was like a parody of what masculinity was. I don't think he
Right.
was trying to convince anyone that he was some crazy masculine guy. And
Right. And every episode of that, he would learn a lesson, usually from his wife. Like that
yeah,
was kind of the point of that show. Whether it was good or not, or an exemplar of good gender or anything like that. But it was and there was that part of it at least.
yeah, yeah. I want to talk
Yeah.
about. Sorry, what were you
Oh,
gonna
no,
say?
go ahead.
I was gonna say I want to talk about a couple of things that I kind of think are interesting, that maybe even I am to some extent guilty of, as far as
Hmm.
as the gender stuff. There's some gender things that I like I said at the beginning, I'm in the front page of our yearbook, I'm in a dress, but like it was a costume day at school. It was a goofy thing, and I realize a lot of times that like there's a lot of things that if we were willing to embrace them would be beneficial, even if it's not like a gender expression for us, like a dress.
Right.
It feels so much more comfortable than jeans.
Right.
Like like you get like a little bit of airflow, and everything's just comfortable. And it's
Right.
kind of funny to me that I like personally, like I'm not saying I would never do it again, but I would don't consider it. It would have to, I'd probably be drunk, and or it'd be Halloween, and I just kind of find it funny because there's no good reason.
Right.
But
I think about that a lot too, because what I was talking about earlier, like I don't really worry about my masculinity, but I don't want to wear a dress, even though you're right. Like if I were to put on a dress, I feel like it would be great, like it's a hot day here right now. I would be very comfortable in that.
Yeah.
But I think it's almost more, at least for me, I think, I'm a little bit more introverted than you. So
A little
like,
bit.
it would be like, oh, I don't like the feeling that like there's going to be a few people at least that are going to stare at me. They're going to be looking at me at this. If this was just more socially acceptable across the board, yeah, I might be wearing a dress all the time. That might be something I like to do. Wouldn't be an expression of my gender, to your point, but it would be, just a way to stay cool in the summer. That would feel great.
Yeah, I think that's a huge reason why I don't consider it or do it, is like the reaction. I don't want,
Right.
I don't mind attention. And obviously there's a lot of communities in now that didn't exist when we were kids, but that I would be fine in that. Arguably I could probably do it where I live and not have any issues, but like, the discomfort of it. But it's interesting. So I haven't done anything that wacky with like Logan, but I remember being like 18 or 19 and going on vacation with my family, and my cousin, they had a costume parade every year where we go on vacation. And my cousin was, I don't know, 3, 4, 5. She must have been younger than 5, I guess. And she wanted to be Roo from Winnie the Pooh.
Okay.
And neither of her parents wanted to be Kanga. And I was like, I'll wear the costume. And we went through the like bar at the resort. And I was literally wearing a Kanga costume, and like the middle of the summer. This isn't Halloween. It's a feminine kangaroo. And I realize when you just were saying the thing about attention and not wanting the attention, like, I don't mind the attention. Like if Logan was like, Dad, I want us to go and I'll be, I don't know, Luigi and you're Princess Peach or something. I would be like, okay. Like I would not think twice about it, I don't think. But if Sarah was like, or even if Sarah was like, I'll go as Mario, you go as Princess Peach, and like we did like a gender bender thing, I wouldn't think of it. But if someone just suggested to me now, I think I'd be like, I'm all set. It's weird how I'm willing to step out of those bounds for others. And I mean, again, that's not a comfort thing, but it's just interesting.
I think it's also context too. I think, when you're doing it in a costume parade or on Halloween, people expect it, or to a certain extent expect it. Where if I was just walking down the street like that, and I think, the point you made earlier about like, there are, like trans women who have some, traditionally masculine traits who walk down the street in a dress, and I don't stare at them. I don't give them a second look or anything like that. But if I did it, if I saw myself walking down the street, someone who looked like myself walking down the street in a dress, I might give a second look, because that would be the only feminine thing going on there, really. And it would look very strange, because there's still that disconnect where it's just like one thing off. Like if I just put on eyeshadow right now, I feel like that would look weird because I'm wearing, like a nice Oxford shirt and, I have a beard and all of these things. It would just be one kind of little bit that feels off. So you would kind of be caught by it. It wouldn't even be something that I would judge people for staring at, because people aren't used to it.
Right. And I bet you there's probably a decent amount of trans people who go through that, at least in the beginning.
Absolutely.
And I think it's that same thing, I think it's that same thing of like, we all, typically, not always, but a lot of us see ourselves harsher than others see us. And we're more self-critical than, if, I was joking earlier about me being ugly, and like, I probably think that I'm uglier than most people think that I am.
You're not an ugly person.
Well, no, I'm an ugly person. But I happen to be good looking. I'm ugly on the inside.
Okay, correction. Yes, thank you.
Maybe I should change the name of the podcast to the Self-Effacing Mike Show, because there's going to be a lot of that, I think. But yeah, I find, I don't know. I haven't thought about like any of that in a long time.
Right.
About myself, and that is the funny thing is like it's become more. I went from introspective about it to, I think I just settled. I also kind of wondering. I wonder how much of that is our generation and the age that we're in, and how much like the age is in the era. And I wonder how much of that is also, on the other hand, like, oh, we're in our 30s, we are who we are, and
Right.
it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like,
Yeah. But we can't, you can trace a lot of things, but you can't really trace everything. Like, who knows? We went to Catholic school, like maybe some of that repression got in there and stuck in, like we have
yeah.
all these things that
Oh,
you
for
can't,
sure. For as
right. You can't
you were you
find
raised
every route. Yeah.
were you Catholic growing up?
Yeah, but we were never super practicing,
Yeah.
ever.
Because I was gonna say, because I have some of that repression, and it's
Oh,
weird
yeah.
because like not even believing it anymore, but you still have the repression, or the not the
Hmm.
repression, I guess, but the shame and the guilt, or
Yeah.
I on the last episode I talked about it a little bit, but like the dark thoughts that you get from it that are almost like, to give it a metaphor, like the something in the corner of your vision,
Right.
like
I think every former Catholic who became an atheist still thinks they're going to hell on some level, and I definitely do. I think about that all the time, but I don't believe in hell. But if it's real, I'm going to end up there. So,
for me, it's not a hell thing as much as just like it is gonna. Okay, I'm gonna give a super weird confession right now.
okay,
And
love this.
this will be the part of the video that makes it on, or the recording that makes it on Instagram. Um, after I saw the Truman Show, Truman Show came out when we were like 13.
I think so. Yeah.
After I saw the Truman Show, have never fully been able to get out of my head the idea that I'm in the Truman Show, and I think it ties somewhat to religion in the idea of you're always being watched.
Right.
And so, like, if I see a car circle the block, and it could not even be the same car sometimes, it could just be like, oh, there was two red Honda Accords, which is like one of the most common colors, a Honda Accord or whatever.
Right.
I would be like, they're circling the block just like that guy did in the Truman Show. And it like gets into my brain a bit. And I think, like, what if they're watching me right now? What if someone's watching me right now?
Right. Yeah, someone always knows when you did something bad, or not even when you're doing something bad, when you might be doing something embarrassing. That's something that's constantly in the back of my mind too. I don't think I'm in the Truman Show, but it's there.
Yeah, I'm glad you don't think you're in the Truman Show.
We can't both be,
Beyond dressing, beyond outward appearance, I suppose, is there anything that you wish you weren't as hung up on with gender?
Sometimes, yeah. I think, I think the thing about gender and masculinity, we were talking about toxic masculinity. I think just in general, I think we're all kind of affected by it, even if we don't think about it that much. If we don't, like, it is kind of a trap. And I sometimes wonder, like what we were just talking about, like, who would I be if that wasn't, a path I was kind of set on at a certain point in my life, whether it was conscious or unconscious by my parents, school, etc.,
Yeah.
And I wonder about that, like, we're not talking about sexuality, but that's a whole thing, like, that's open there. I think, like, am I, like, I consider myself a straight man for the most part, and like, would I be more free and open about that if I hadn't had that, you're a boy and boys like girls kind of thing set up for me at a certain stage in my life, where it's like, yeah, okay, I get this, would I, what would my interests be, things like that. Like, there's so many things that actually do play. Like, I like football. Would I be really into, who knows what else, I don't think I really limit myself from anything, quote unquote feminine, but, would there be something that I would, be really into that I'm not, or would I, love dance or something like that, like that could all be there.
Yeah.
And those, I don't want to say those weren't paths that were open to me, because I think my parents would have supported me. And I think, it just was, those were paths that I never even thought to go down at any point.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That's limiting. And I feel like that is, it's not something that I'm necessarily like, oh, it's a tragedy or anything like that, or I'm really sad about it. I don't really think about it that much, but it's definitely there. That those things are like, oh, I could have been a whole different person, and maybe the real me is somewhere back there, and I didn't take those paths. But you can't really think about that way. But it is interesting how much of a role that plays in kind of the whole direction of our lives as men.
So I think that's a good spot to wrap up the discussion, and I'm going to go into a question that I've been asking all of my guests, and I'll explain why after I ask the question. And but so the question, I guess, the way I've been wording it is, what is a joke or impression or something about yourself that somebody has made that it was your favorite? What was your favorite joke about yourself or impression of yourself?
Ooh. So I don't know if this one will mean anything to you, because I don't think you're much of a sports fan. And it might not mean much to your general audience either. But I remember one time, so there was a football player named Andrew Luck. He played for the Indianapolis Colts. He was a quarterback. And
that's basketball, right?
Yes, exactly. And he was kind of famous that he kind of had a very deep voice, but kind of talked like his mouth was full of marbles half the time.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who pointed out that I sound a lot like him and look a lot like him. So that was something that really put me down, but it was spot on and made me laugh that I'm this, big goofy quarterback who talks like his mouth is full of marbles.
That is good. That's a good one. Now that you've said that, I'm a little hurt that your favorite wasn't "Oh Pat, oh Matt." To give a little context,
I really should have chosen that one.
Yeah. So just to give a little context, my brother-in-law was one of our friends in our group. Well, he still is one of our friends in our group.
Yeah.
But before he was my brother-in-law, he was one of our friends in our group. And after a wedding one time, we were at a bar, and he also has an extremely deep voice like Pat, and they were talking, and I just started, and I think we didn't have enough seats or something, and one of them jokingly said to the other, like, "You can sit on my lap," and I said, "Oh Pat, oh Matt," and just in like the deepest, like Andre the Giant voice I could do.
Yeah.
And it kept, I don't know, I felt like that kept coming up at least for the rest of that night, maybe for a while.
Right.
And that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I feel like anytime I see Matt, that comes up. Yeah.
I have not thought about it until you started talking about your deep voice
right.
Yeah, so the reason I've been asking the question, and I think that what we find laughable about ourselves is really revealing.
Right.
I think that it, my mom always likes to say that she can't handle anybody who doesn't have a sense of humor. And having a sense of humor about yourself is arguably the hardest for most people. And so the idea of what is it that you find ridiculous or laughable about yourself, to me, it's a window into who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, we brought up like insecurities earlier. Like that's something that, where you turn an insecurity, like I have always been kind of insecure about, the way I talk, at least in public and stuff like that. And and being able to turn that into something that you laugh at is kind of a natural response mechanism for that. And it really does reveal a lot about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Before we go, is there anything that I know you don't have a podcast or you're not doing anything else that I'm aware of that you would want to plug, but is there anything you feel like plugging?
Yeah, I don't have anything to plug. I don't know. Donate to abortion funds, I would guess would be, if you're listening to that, do that.
Yeah. Based on most of the people that I've talked to that are listening to this podcast so far, I'm going to guess that is not going to happen. But, hopefully our audience grows just in general. So, yeah. It's been great having you on. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and I plan on having you on again. We'll come up with a different topic. Or we can just do an, between a half hour and an hour of, maybe I'll have you and Matt on at the same time. So
yeah, we could just, have fake sex on your podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
All right.